So I'm Marion Siekierski. I'm with the Ottawa Renewable Energy Co-operative. I joined the co-op as a general manager 2 years ago. Previously, I worked in environmental education on the high development standards for buildings in Ottawa, and previously in international development and finance abroad. So thank you so much for the previous speakers who really sort of showed us the big issues and the big questions that we have to address. And I hope that with my presentation you get a little bit of a sense of maybe what you can do individually through a cooperative like OREC in getting us on the way to really addressing the energy transition. And it was challenging, Scott, when you were asking earlier as to, do I like the doom and gloom and like sort of tell it like it is and all the bad news that are out there about the climate crisis, as I would call it, or do I want to sort of hear the happy news? And I think for me, it's really both. I do think it's important that we talk about the doom and gloom and all the challenges that are there, but equally also find ways of addressing these challenges. And I think that's ultimately why I really enjoy the work that I do, because I feel that with every project we do make a difference. The cooperative makes a difference in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and that's the biggest satisfaction that I get out of my job every day. So let's talk about OREC. Could you go to the next slide? Oh, there we are. So when we talk about OREC is really kind of a really diverse organization. There isn't one story that we can tell about OREC. There are really 4 stories, and I'll try to keep it brief, but I do want to touch on all of these. So we are a cooperative that develops renewable energy projects. So ultimately, we're all about community energy, both in the electric sense, but also in the sort of the community sense, the social sense. We are a group of investors, a group of members, more than 1,000 now, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail later. So yes, community energy, but it's also about investing it with impact. So our members can invest in our projects, and it's really a fantastic form of a green investment. I don't know if some of you have maybe looked for, green banking, green finance. It is somewhat difficult to find, and we are one opportunity for impact investing, or investing with impact, as we prefer to call it. We're also an organization that is a change maker, because with these big transitions that we're facing, we do bump up against regulatory challenges. And so some of our board members and members have been particularly active in addressing some of these regulatory barriers and speaking to policymakers, speaking to municipal representatives and so on, to make sure that we create a regulatory environment that enables us to make progress on the energy transition. And of course, we're a renewable energy partner. So we are a partner to businesses, to institutions, to crown corporations, and so on, providing them with renewable energy. There we go. We did speak about this earlier, so I don't need to go into that in any more detail, and I think I'm preaching to the converted anyway. We need to get away from fossil fuels. To do that, we need to electrify our end users, and that will increase our electricity demand. I do want to talk a little bit about kind of the bigger picture of the electricity grid and how that is likely to change, and it kind of feeds in nicely with what Art Hunter was talking about as well. So you've heard already about the centralized electricity grid, where we have a few big generators, so nuclear power plants, big wind farms, gas-fired power plants, and they sort of, through these big transmission lines, feed into our communities and to us as end users. But through the transmission, and I think it was mentioned earlier as well, there's actually quite a bit of energy loss. Now, also these big centralized generators take a long time to build, right? You were talking about how long it takes to build a nuclear power plant or to refurbish them and so on. So as we are in the energy transition, the future will look a lot more what you see on the bottom. And there was a similar slide in one of the previous presentations where we need to generate electricity much closer to demand. It's much quicker to build, it's cheaper to build, it's closer to demand, meaning we lose less in the transition. So you will have in future, we will have a system that's much more like this puzzle that you see on the bottom. And that's where the EV cars come in, where that sort of talk to the grid and that serve as a backup, and the battery storage that I think the speaker after me will talk about in much more detail. And this bottom scenario is really where us as a cooperative come in, because that's the community level power generation where we can really shine. And this is just an example out of Denmark, where you can see on the left-hand side in the mid-80s it was much more centralized generation. But now you see all these little dots, and it's combined heat and power, but also wind farms that are now producing a lot more electricity than just a few decades ago. So that's kind of the direction that most systems will be moving. We're not there yet in Ontario, but it's by being a little bit slower, maybe in some of these developments, we have the benefit of learning from others as well. That's how I look at it. Yeah. So now let's talk about OREC a little bit more in detail. We are a for-profit cooperative. So it's essentially a business, but we follow a cooperative business model. The co-op was set up in 2010, so we're already in our 14th year now. We grew up in the feed-in tariff era, and I'm sure most of you know what that is. So where we were able to enter into long-term contracts with the government of Ontario for specific set kilowatt-hour rates. The majority of our projects are still FIT projects, and we'll talk about that a bit later too. So big picture is we develop and finance community-level renewable energy projects. So mostly solar, but we did also acquire 2 wind turbines over the past 2 years. So we're very excited. We recently accepted our 1,000th member. That was kind of a big milestone that we had set for ourselves. Yay, thank you. About 50% of our members are investors as well. So some just join as members because they want to support what we do, and others invest. As I mentioned, we have 22 solar projects, we have 2 wind turbines, and we also have 3 energy efficiency projects. We've raised close to $12 million now, because we are in an active capital raise, from our members, and we pay back to our investors in dividends and capital repayments, and over the past 14 years we've repaid $3.5 million already. We do pay an annual dividend. So far it's always declared by the board, but so far every year we have paid a dividend. And we do annual capital raises. So we raise capital from our members, we raise money from our members to develop new projects every year. So we've grown by 35% every year. Sorry, 55%. So that's the renewable energy production that we've grown. And like I said, the early projects were quite small, but they're getting bigger and bigger. And just with the addition of the wind turbines, we've doubled our generation capacity. Just to give you an idea where we have our projects, so the majority is still in and around Ottawa. We do have the 2 wind turbines at Lake Huron there, and But we are open to members from anywhere in Ontario now. That's a very recent development. And we are looking for projects in sort of Ottawa and Eastern Ontario. That's really our main focus. I just want to give you a few examples of the projects that we've worked on. This is, for those of you that come from Ottawa, this is the Canadian Museum of Science and Technology. We have OREC solar on their rooftop, and looking at opportunities to ideally extend our cooperation with them, and also with other essentially big roof owners, so universities, educational institutions more generally, but also it can also be businesses that we cooperate with, or farms, basically anybody with a big roof and a fairly big electricity load. That's a high school that we've cooperated with. They have their our solar on their roof. And that's one of our energy efficiency projects, where we've replaced the lighting at the RA Center in Ottawa with LED lighting. We also have a number of projects with housing co-ops, some for solar and some for energy efficiency, where we've replaced thermostats and lighting also in those cases. And that's just a mixture of some of our projects. We also have, as you see on the bottom right, we have 2 ground mount solar projects as well. And there was a slide in one of the previous speakers with the agrivoltaics, and that's actually something we're looking into now to see how we can combine the solar projects with hopefully with sheep. We like that idea, but there might be other options as well. And apparently sheep don't chew the cables, so that's a good thing. That's one of our wind turbines. It's compared to those big farms that you see nowadays, it's a relatively small sister or brother of those big turbines. But it does feed the community grid, whereas the bigger wind turbines, they would sort of break the local grid. They have to go to the transmission grid. So again, it emphasizes that community level engagement that is important to us as an organization. And so who is OREC? We are, as I mentioned, an organization of more than 1,000 members. OREC is run by or guided by a board of directors. We have 10 directors right now. One of them is here, Graham, which some of you will know and some of you have chatted with over lunch. They get involved in the business development side of things, the advocacy, and are highly engaged in the organization. And so I work with some of them on a day-to-day basis. We also have contractors, of course, all the professional services that we work with, from bookkeepers to accountants to technical contractors that maintain and monitor the equipment. And our members are really diverse. We have the whole sort of age range. We have members that are just members. They just want to support us as an organization. But we also have members that have invested. Some members have invested $500, which is the minimum investment. Some members have invested many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it really, there's a wide range there. Some members get very engaged. They join some of our committees that we have, a communications committee or a technical committee. We encourage members also to get involved in bringing us ideas for business development opportunities. We also want to become much more of a knowledge-sharing community as well. And I spoke to someone whose name, unfortunately, I don't know, over lunch about her experience of with geothermal and with net zero housing and EV cars and so on. And also in our membership, there are so many people with so much knowledge, and we want to make that more accessible to amongst our members as well. because I think we can all learn a lot from each other, and some people have gone a little bit further in that in their own personal energy transition, and it's great to have the opportunity to share that knowledge, and we want to be a platform to do that. So that's just briefly, as I mentioned earlier, we do have to do quite a bit of advocacy to promote the regulatory changes that we need. And we have seen two of our board members have been particularly active on that over the last 10 years, really. And we are now beginning to see the changes that will eventually make it easier for us to operate, which is exciting to see. And it's about time too. So that's now talking about OREC as a renewable energy partner. And that really has sort of two sides. On the one hand, we are a partner for our project hosts. So let's say the Museum of Science and Technology. We developed the project, we put solar on their roofs, we maintain, insure, and repair, if ever required, the equipment. They get, and we enter into a long-term contract with them, so like 20, 30-year contracts with them, where they have a set kilowatt-hour rate that they know and can plan with, which they can't from the grid, because you never know where the grid prices will go. And our assumption is very much that the grid prices will go up, whereas ours stay sort of lower than what we expect the grid price to go. So the benefit to our project partners is really they don't have any upfront cost. We raise the capital from our members, develop the project, put it on the roof, do everything. It's essentially a turnkey solution for them, and they get from day one when it's operational, they obviously have renewable energy, net zero energy, which to more and more of our, I'll say, bilateral partners is becoming more important, because it becomes a marketing message as well, right? Like if you think about educational institutions, the university, or like a science and technology museum, they should all be about these new technologies. And that's so it becomes important for their institution and for their own marketing as well. And also we bring into those organizations kind of that community connection. So especially again for universities, for other educational institutions that have their own communities, there's really a fantastic overlap between our communities and their community. But we also, as the ISO was mentioned a number of times, so the Independent Electricity System Operator, is beginning to organize procurement, large-scale procurements for renewable energy. We see ourselves as the community partner in some of these bigger projects, where we've seen it in a few cases, and Graham, I don't know if you want to add anything to that later, but sometimes energy developers come to communities and they don't maybe have the experience, or haven't taken the time to connect with the community, let's say on an equal footing. So it can create divisions in communities, and we've seen that in a number of cases where communities then say we will not even allow any renewable energy development on a bigger scale. So we see ourselves as a community partner in these situations where we can connect with the community, we can represent the community, we can bring the community into these conversations and make sure that the community's interests are represented as well. And we are in contact with one big developer. We can't say because it's not signed yet, but it's a relationship that we consider sort of strategic for us as an organization as we grow over the next decade. Sorry, was there a question? No, okay. So I do want to talk a little bit about OREC as the investment opportunity as well that we are. No, flies in by itself. So as I explained, we develop renewable energy projects. So we go out and approach potential partners, develop the projects, and then we go out to our members. raise the capital, build the projects, and then the projects obviously generate revenue from the electricity that we sell, either to our bilateral project partners, in the case of net metering projects, as they're called, or from the electricity that we sell to the grid, essentially, to ISO under the FIT contract. So in both cases, no matter who we essentially sell the electricity to, there is a revenue, and that's ultimately then distributed back to our member investors in the form of dividends and capital repayments. Yeah. And what we found, actually, as we were analyzing our data in preparation for this current raise, is that by investing in OREC, so by investing at this community level and kind of investing in these bigger solar projects compared to putting solar on your own roof, you're actually having up to 3 times the greenhouse gas reduction impact than putting, for example, solar on your own roof. So we had the example of one of our board members. Actually, he had a quote of putting solar on his own roof, which was about $30,000. And compared that with a $30,000 investment in OREC, and found that just because of economies of scale, we can obviously, for that same amount, we can build bigger. So the greenhouse gas reduction through our projects is much better than investing in your own residential solar. Of course, there are different motivations as to why people want to put solar on their own building or on their own house. But for people that are primarily sort of environmentally driven, it definitely makes financial sense to invest on the community level. Also, investing in OREC means you don't have to pay the insurance for the system, you don't have to maintain it because we do everything. So that's another advantage. We do, as I mentioned, we do pay dividends. Last year's dividend was 4%, the 2 prior years 3.85%. The average over the past 12 years, because in 2012 we built the first project, is 3.4%. And with the current raise that we're in right now, we offer 10-year preference shares, as they're called. So they have a term of 10 years, and we pay dividends every year as declared by the board. There cannot be a guarantee that there will be a dividend, but there have always been dividends paid over the past 12 years every year. And 5% of the invested capital is paid back every year, and the remaining 55% is paid back at the end of the 10 years. So at the end of the 10-year investment, you have all your capital back.